Again, my name is Mara Walsh. I come to you from the United States, specifically between Philadelphia and New York, which is in the Eastern time zone. I mention that because if you have to do some converting to get the time of our virtual tour presentations into your local time, you can by all means just Google, if it's 5 o'clock in Philadelphia, what time is it here in Rome? When we are not traveling, I host groups on physical tours, as well as help others plan their own group vacations and family vacations. Don't let the name Girl Travel Tools fool you. We welcome everyone on our tours, not just girls. The name came about because I started leading physical tours with EF Tours for Girls. And I now do that as well, but I lead many tours for adults. I really cater to anyone from ages teen through senior citizens. Some of my tours are adult only, while the tours that go off in the summer are multi-generation. But when COVID struck, we were unable to travel physically, so I started traveling with my tour guide friends virtually. I really wanted to support the tour director community during this time of travel restrictions where they were unable to work. And I really wanted to keep the excitement of travel alive for my travel group and also extend that opportunity to those of you who've learned about us through your friends, your family, on social media and other means. And thankfully, these virtual tour presentations have served both purposes quite well. You could tell that my time zone is off. I can't barely even get my words out at this point, but I'm trying to do my best. We've done about 75 tours since COVID struck. If you'd like to access any of the recordings, they're available on my website, girltraveltours.com. They're also available on my Facebook page and my YouTube channel. So pretty much if you Google Girl Travel Tours and Mara Walsh, you'll come up with all the ways that you can see the recordings. We have several more tours planned for the coming year. Really just, most of them are scheduled out for the next few months. And I'm gonna share those with you here so that you can see what you can schedule and you can register for. We have a few weeks off between this one and the next virtual tour because I'll be traveling to Ecuador and the Galapagos. But we will resume our virtual tour series right when I get back in late March. In late March, we will start with Slovenia. We'll go to the Cayman Islands. We'll do Cuomo and the Lake region. We're going to go to the Holy Land for Easter and Passover. We're going to do Madrid. It was rescheduled. It was rescheduled from March to May. And then we have a few more in the works that we're trying to get up and running so that you can sign up. So I'm really excited about continuing this program. And I will say that when we are off a week or two because I'm traveling, please use that as an opportunity to go back and review some of the old recordings. We have more than 75 up there. So I'm assuming that you haven't seen all of them, but if you would like to follow my travels specifically, we have a private Facebook group, which is Girl Travel Tours. It's a private Facebook group that I manage, and we blog and post from our touring locations every day. So if you are interested in following along, please join that group and just mention my name and you'll get approved to get in. And then you can follow along with us as we travel physically as well. As long as you're interested in viewing these presentations, we'll continue to produce them for you. You can feel free to ask a question in the Q&A. We will deal with those questions after the presentation. And if you want to chat with me, obviously you could do that through the chat, but we don't read off the chat comments into the audience. And I always like to include an interactive poll before I get started on each of our virtual tour presentation destinations. And today's virtual tour, like all of them, we run the same question. What is your connection to Marche, Italy? I've been and love it. I have a trip booked. I plan to go in the future. I have no set plans, but I'm interested in the location, or I am solely interested in experiencing it virtually. We have about half of the people who have commented so far. And I'm going to leave that open for a couple minutes for folks. Again, the poll is, what is your connection to Marche, Italy? If you are on Facebook, you can just put it in the comments. I'm going to end the poll and I'm going to show everybody what those results were. But essentially, we have about 63% that have no set plans but are interested in the location. I expect that to really change by the end of this presentation, and all of a sudden it will become one of your bucket list items, as that is definitely the thing that happens for all of us as we go through these virtual tour presentations. They become the next must-see place that we must see in person as well. So it looks like we only have about 6% of the people that have been, and a very small percent that have a trip booked. So we'll change that by the end of this hour and a half. I'm going to stop sharing that. If the poll did not disappear from your screen, you might have to go into the top left and just click on it to get it out of your viewing. So today's presentation, like all of them, are scheduled for 90 minutes plus a Q&A. So I hope you're ready for the presentation. As you know, a tour would not be complete without a fantastic tour director. And we have a very experienced tour guide with us tonight. But first, he's a first-time Girl Travel Tours virtual tour guide. Matteo will share with us the region he lives in and guides in. So he's extremely knowledgeable about this region. And I will be sharing with you via chat and the Q&A how you can tip the tour guide. If you appreciate this presentation and our guide's knowledge, you can send a tip via Venmo, PayPal, or credit card through our website. All of the tips go directly to the guide once collected, minus the Zoom operating expenses. So today I want to welcome Matteo. Hello, Matteo. Feel free to turn off your mute and your video and come on in and join us. How are you doing, Matteo? It's nice to see you again.
Ciao, Mara. Thank you
Ciao.
for having me here tonight. And ciao, everybody. I think ciao is the best known Italian word at the moment, and I hope they get to learn a few more.
Okay, so I'm gonna let you take over, Matteo. You can go into the controls and start sharing your screen, and then we can take it from there.
Fantastic. Okay, grazie. Thank you very much, Mara. Buonasera or ciao, everybody, from Matteo. As Mara just told you, I've been working as a tour director for almost 20 years. And I was born and raised in Rome, although I've been traveling for, half of my life. I'm 40 years old now. I started when I was 20. So the reason why I'm presenting Le Marche, or just Marche, and we will look at this afterwards today, is because this is where I live now. So as I told you, I was born in Rome and raised there. But since the pandemic started, I moved to Le Marche. But the main reason is because half of my family is from here.
Matteo, I'm just going to jump in for a second, if you don't mind. If you could share your screen so that we could see the beginning of your presentation.
Yes, 1 second. And hold on, it's I'm trying, but I don't know what's going on.
It's always something that we share 20 times that fails us when we're on screen with our audience, right? If you want to, can you just go up to the top again and share your, and I don't speak Italian, but there's that button in the top with the go.
Let me try again.
Yep, just go from the start. Great, and then hit the presenter.
I know, but
right there. Yep.
Yeah, but I can't.
It's not going.
You know what? That's why. Sorry. There was the bar, the control bar.
Perfect. Perfect. You are in great shape right now.
Okay, we're good now. Okay, great. So, am I good to go?
Yes, you are perfect.
Great.
I will stop talking over you.
Okay, so grazie. Thank you, Mara. So as I was saying, I now live in this region, which is named Marche. Since the pandemic started, that's because so many things changed, life plans. And since I have family here, this was my choice. I've always loved this area. And now that I live here, it's been like almost 2 years now, I started trying to promote this beautiful place because as we noticed from the poll, just very few people heard about this place. Very few people have been here. So I think it's worth getting to know a little more about this amazing region. And as you can see from the presentation, we call it Italy in one region. That is the official sponsor motto of the region when they promote themselves abroad. And that's because this region has got pretty much everything from the mountains to the hills to the beautiful landscapes to the sea, because it's facing the Adriatic Sea, as we will see in a moment. Okay, there we go. I wanted to use this first picture. This is pretty much the area I live in, which is the southern part of the Marche region. And it may remind you a little bit of Tuscany. Of course, there are main differences like the big mountains that we don't often see in Tuscany. But since it's called the next Tuscany, I thought it was worth showing one of the pictures that mostly represents this beautiful region and the southern part of it, which is where I live. So where is Marche? As you can see, it is located on the east coast of Italy. It's the region highlighted in red, right across the Adriatic Sea from Croatia and by the region of Assisi. So I marked Assisi in its region and Rome in the region of Lazio. Consider that from Rome to the southern part of the region, it's about like 2 hours and 20 minutes driving. So it is not that bad. And there's a very good highway and also very scenic. Going further, here it is a better picture from the satellite. So you see it is highlighted in red. And if you look at the very northern part of the region, there is San Marino. So just to give a reference, we are also very close. Or actually they are, because I live in the south of the region. So those living in the north are just around the corner from the independent Republic of San Marino. Next. And there are things about the Marche that you probably never heard about. So I thought it was worth giving you some of them, but there's like way more. So a few curious facts about Marche is it's the only Italian region with a plural name. It comes from the word Marca, which was the name of these pieces of land that belonged to the state of the church. So they were under the control of the Pope. And they meant a border. It was the border of the state of the church. If you think about the English verb to mark, when you're marking something, you're just defining a line or something like that. It's the same in Italian, marcare. So that's why it was Marca. When Italy became one country, all the marcas were put together into one region that was changed to Marche. The reason why you see the H in between is because without the H, we would read a Marche. So to give the hard sound to the C in this case, you need the H in between. So the only region with a plural name, first thing. Second, it's the birthplace of Raphael. Sorry, not this one, sorry guys. This Raffaello Sanzio, the famous Italian artist who is now buried in the Pantheon. You probably saw the Pantheon on one of Mara's virtual tours of Rome. And that's where the word marquise comes from. For those of you that know some French, there is a famous poem, the Marquise de Sade, because in Italian, in English, you still use the French word marquise, but in Italian, it's marchese, because it was the person in charge of the Marca, of course, under the control of the Pope. And last not least, this is usually something that women appreciate, but men would love this too. This is the region, that's the Marquise de Sade, just in case. This is the region where Italian shoes are made. So if you buy real Italian shoes really made in Italy, they're most likely 99% made in the region of Marche. Okay, so here's the shoes. Oh, talking a little bit about the origins of the Marche, of course, the very ancient part of the history, it's a mix in between history and legends. But part of the legendary origin of the Marche is found in the logo of the region nowadays. I'll show you part of it. As you can tell, it looks like a bird, and it actually is, because this bird is embedded in the Marche logo. Here it is. You see the M, which is generated by the union of the bird with the rest of the letter M, and it's surrounded by a green shield. Green because the Marche, it's a color that they use a lot for themselves. Why is there a bird in the logo of the Marche? Because Le Marche, when we talk about Le Marche, of course, the region, as you noticed, stretches all along the East Coast, but the real origin of the region is in the southern part of it, where I live, for example. And it comes from the legend of a population that really existed, the Sabines, that were also, from central Italy. They were a little closer to Rome. And the Sabines, they used to have a very brutal ritual in spring, which was called the Ver Sacrum. It was very brutal because in the beginning, as a sort of sacrifice to the divinities and to in the hope to have a better year, they used to kill anything that was born in spring. So babies, animals, plants, anything that was growing or coming out to life in spring was killed. Then they became a little less brutal, and especially the babies were no longer killed, but they were virtually, which is a word we can easily use nowadays, they were virtually killed, being transferred somewhere else when they were old enough to travel independently. So what happened? These people migrated to new lands to be colonized, and every time they were following somehow an animal that was considered sacred. In this case, here it is a picture from the Sabines. The sacred animal was the woodpecker. Woodpecker in Latin is picus, P-I-C-U-S. So looking at this very simple but clear map of the Marche, if you look at the lower part, the highlighted province is Ascoli Piceno. Piceno is the name of the whole southern part of the Marche, and it also includes technically the area of Fermo. So Piceno was the region that was colonized when they followed the Picus. That's why we have Picen. There would be Picenus in as the old word, from the word Picus, the woodpecker, and that's why you also find it in the logo of the Marche. To make you understand how important this region already was to the Sabines, because of course the Romans conquered it, although it was not that easy against the people of the Piceno, I will show you this old map that shows 3 roads. The one we have to look at is the red one. It's called Via Salaria, which still nowadays exists. This was made in the probably 2000 years before Christ by the Sabines. And the word Salaria was named after the word sale, which is salt in Italian. Salt was used for everything, so it was so important that they had to build a road to bring it to them. So imagine that the Sabines were living right in the middle. If you look at the central part of the red road, you see Sabini. That's pretty much the area they lived in, a little closer to Rome. So the salt mines, both on the Adriatic Sea, so towards the Picenum area, but also towards Rome. Also because the red line then continues in black from Rome towards the Tyrrhenian Sea, if you can see the lower part of the map. And so it was still the Salaria, but from Rome, it was then named Via Campana. But the salt was so important also for the payments. When you think of the English word salary, it comes from the Italian salario, which is a word derived by the word salt, sale. So Le Marche were already connected to the west coast, and this road was then improved by the Romans that sent 2 teams. One was sent to the Adriatic coast, the other one to the Tyrrhenian coast, so east and west, and they were working together, and at some point they met, and they also celebrated the ending of the renovation of the Via Salaria, of this road, and there also used to be a little temple to celebrate this. Now it's gone, we only have like one piece of a column left, but just to make you understand how important this road was. And it's interesting because this is the only Roman road that was dedicated to something like material, because other roads, for example, the blue one, it's the Via Flaminia. It was because of the person who ordered the construction of this road, a Roman politician named Flaminium. Okay, so the Salaria is named after the salt. Okay, time to go. Andiamo. These are the 4 cities that we are going to explore. Just so you know, I picked the ones that I like the most, and I think that can give you a general overview over the Marche. But there is much, 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 much more to see than just the 4 cities that we're looking at. So Ascoli Piceno, Acquaviva Picena. So as you can understand by the names, we're remaining in the lower part, in the southern part of the region. Then we have Fermo and Loreto. Okay, ready? Andiamo. Ascoli Piceno, the city of travertine. And it's not my definition, it's how they call it. They call it city of travertine or the city of the 100 towers. Now, city of travertine, because most of the buildings are covered with the local travertine. As you can see here, we have in this main picture, there is one of the main squares, Piazza del Popolo, that we will see later. In the distance, you can already see some of the mountains, just to make you understand. All the caves for the travertine are very close to Ascoli, and that's why it is the travertine is so used in the city of Ascoli Piceno. As I told you, it has origins from the populations of central Italy. The Sabines, of course, there is also a little bit of mix with the small Greek colonies that were here, because the Greeks came from east. So this was one of the first, the east coast of Italy was one of the first places they would colonize. They lost the war against Rome in the year 89 before Christ, after 2 tough years of battles. But consider still nowadays, the people of Ascoli are known to be really, really tough. But the Romans knew that too. And so they, after some time, they thought it was a good idea to give them more importance. And so the city of Ascoli became an important Roman province. So they were sort of independent. They had more power than just a colony. And that's because the Romans wanted to avoid fighting with the city of Ascoli once again. The problem is that when the Roman Empire ended in the 6th, or started falling in the 6th century after Christ, Ascoli was affected by the invasions of the Goths, of the Longobards, and then the Franks. The Franks arrived at the end of the 8th century, okay? And they were led by the so well-known Charlemagne, who, despite what we may think, he gave Ascoli a chance, because he made an agreement with the Pope, Sergius IV, and Ascoli was declared independent and also able to mint their own money, which, as you can imagine, it was a great privilege for the city. So afterwards, in the 12th century, it finally became an independent comune, so an independent city, gaining even more importance in the political scenery of the Italic peninsula. The problem came with at the same time with Frederick II of Swabia. Now, for those of you that know Tuscany, you probably know the town of San Gimignano, which is made of all these towers that you can see from far away. The towers, also in Ascoli, were built by families to show their power. So it was a way to symbolize the power of the city and the families that lived in it. So Frederick II decided to destroy at least half of the towers that were in town. So we know that out of the 200 towers that were in Ascoli, 92, 94 were destroyed by will of Frederick II. Now, the domination of the Swabians lasted until the death of Frederick's son, Manfredi, and afterwards Ascoli went under the control of the Holy See. And pretty much the things that we see nowadays had the influence of the Holy See, so the Pope or the governor of the state of the church. The first place, the first square that we see as we get to Ascoli is Piazza Arringo. Here it is. Now, the sky is not the greatest. It was a little cloudy, so I hope you don't mind. And imagine with a blue sky, it's much, much better. But Piazza Arringo comes from the Italian word arengo, which means a public speech. As you can see, it is a huge square, and it was used for public meetings and public speeches already in the 12th century, which is when Ascoli was gaining power. We know that in 1152, right in the middle, they built a little stage for people to speak from. And the most probably popular person that spoke in Ascoli in the year 1215 was Francis of Assisi. And that really had an effect, because right after he spoke here, 30 people converted to the Franciscan, or they decided to follow the Franciscan order of friars, and they built a church in honor of Francis that we will see later. So here we are entering, and we are on the east side of the square. So just behind our shoulders is the cathedral that we will see in the next picture. So we are facing west. I'm telling you this because it'll be useful later on. So we are facing west. Now I'm just turning around and you will be facing east. So you will have west behind you. Pay attention. Here we are. You can recognize the flags on the right side. And so let me tell you the three main buildings that we have on this square. The first one with the flags is Palazzo dell'Arringo. So it's the square named, it's the palace named after the square, which is nowadays a Baroque building. We will look at that in detail afterwards. Then right in the middle, we have the church, the Cathedral of Ascoli, dedicated to the patron saint, Saint Emidius. And next to it, you see there's a little building. We will see it closer afterwards. There is the baptistry just next to the church. Allora, let me first tell you a little bit about Saint Emidius. Here we have the church on the left and the interior on the right. Saint Emidius was a Christian martyr. He came from Northern Europe, pretty much where nowadays we have Germany. He arrived in the area of Ascoli. Since he was a Christian, he was executed and he was beheaded. Now, according to the Christian tradition, he decided to pick up his head after he was beheaded. That's why he was declared a saint afterwards. He picked up his head and walked with his head outside of the city to the place where every person was buried. Because as you can imagine, people were buried outside of the city. And right after this, I will show you the church that is now built in the place where he was, where he went to bury himself. The church itself, by the studies that we have, especially during the restorations of the late 1900s, these restorations found evidence that the very first church was here between the 4th and 5th century after Christ, of course, and it was built reusing a pre-existing Roman basilica. But when we say basilica and we connect it to the Roman Empire, it was not a religious building, it was just a building for public speeches. So there used to be a Roman basilica here. This was part of the Roman Forum, as we can imagine, and they started building churches that were then enlarged until the 12th century in a style that was a mix between Romanic and then Gothic. The big change happens at the end of the 15th century during the Renaissance, when the Bishop of Ascoli decides to renovate the facade. And why is this? Because this was the only church, although it was the most important, it was the only church that was not being renovated as well as the other ones. So they had to keep up. The facade that we look nowadays is the work of restoration by a very important artist of those times, Cola della Matrice. Now, to give you a reference, Amatrice is the town he was from. For those of you that love Italian food, there is the famous Amatriciana, okay, that comes from the city of Amatrice in central Italy, which is, by the way, unfortunately, Amatrice was destroyed in 2016 by a terrible earthquake that we had in Italy. I don't know if you probably remember that. So Cola della Matrice restored the facade and gave it this aspect typical of the Renaissance. We can see two towers. The one on the right is the is a bell tower, and then there's a smaller one, a shorter one on the left that was a civic tower. So it was a tower meant to be a living place for some families, and they were simply embedded and in the church. And of course they tried to make them match with the with the columns that are separating the three naves of the church. I mean, there will be three naves inside, but you can already see them from the outside, and the columns are matching with the towers are matching with the columns that are separating the facade. Once we enter, this is pretty much what we see. There's now three naves. The decorations are not the greatest, and at the moment, the whole ceiling is covered because they are restoring it. But it appears like this, mostly blue. And the interesting thing is that we're looking at the main altar with the ciborius, which is that, you know, a little thing just below the main dome. The ciborius is not that old. It was made at the end of the 1800s by an architect named Giuseppe Sacconi. We will see this architect later on, and I want you to keep in mind the name. Also, the decorations of the dome were made during the end of the 1800s by a local painter. So from here we go back. No, from here we have the church, sorry, of St. Emidius by the Grottos. That is the place outside of Ascoli where St. Emidius buried himself. This is where the sort of catacombs used to be, and this is the church that was made in the 1700s. This is a late 1600s. This is a Baroque church that was made by the same architect that did the Palazzo dell'Arringo that we will see in a few moments. This is the baptistry next to the church. Now, I want you to look at the little map that I made, because in the picture we see the baptistry, and the door that we see is the entrance. Now, the entrance is where you see Piazza Arringo on the little map, okay? The exit is on the side. So looking at the baptistry, the exit will be on the right, and that gives you almost direct access to the Church of St. Emidius. It is just next to it. So people used to enter from the square, get baptized. There is, you know, you can see the little pool in the middle, and get out from the right side. Now, why did I put the 4 cardinal points on the map? Because it is important. There is a concept behind this. Why are people entering from west? Because west is where the sun sets, and where the sun sets is where the darkness is. If you're not baptized in the Christian vision, you are not enlightened by God. You're not in the light of God. So you're entering unbaptized from the darkness, and then you're ready to go to church. And that is the concept of coming from the west, entering the baptistry from the west. The style is Romanic, and this building dates back to the 11th century after Christ. And back to the square, we have the Palazzo dell'Arringo. As you can see, it is massive, it is huge, but it didn't look like this in the first place, also because it is a Baroque building, so 17th century. The first building here was in the 12th century. Then in the 13th and 14th, since the city was growing also politically and economically, they built a second building here, which was the Palazzo del Comune, so the sort of city hall that was used for public meetings. Okay, what we see nowadays is something that was only generated in the early 1600s. So a technique that was used a lot in Ascoli, instead of, okay, let me tell you this, I'm sure the people from Marche will I mean, I'm half Marchigiano, so I can say that, but they're known to be a little greedy, okay? Just like the people from Pisa and Tuscany, people from Marche are known to be very greedy also because the tax officers of the state of the church used to come from Marche, so they were known to be the ones asking for the money, and so they're known to be a little like this, a little greedy. So since they were they didn't want to spend a lot of money demolishing the pre-existing buildings and creating new ones, what they did is they added a wall outside that was covering the existing buildings, so they only had to work on one facade, and then of course adapting what was behind, you know, in an easier way. In this case, this is a project from 1610 that was then developed by Giuseppe Giosafatti. That was a very important artist. He studied a lot in Rome, so he was impressed by the Baroque, and he designed the building like this. Let me get a little closer. This is, you know, the facade. You see, we have these 5 arches at the bottom that lead to a garden, which is inside. And let's say that on the right and on the left, you have the 2 buildings that were embedded in this main palazzo, in this main palace. And then on the second floor, as depending on where you are in Italy, it would be the first floor, because we call the ground floor 0. But anyway, just at the floor of the flags, you have the windows, and you can see that they're all decorated with caryatids, so female figures that are supporting the upper part. And there is an alternation between triangles and semicircular windows that are supported by the caryatids. Just to give you a reference, the caryatids are the same type of female figures that you have in Athens by the Parthenon. Now, next to this place, there is the most popular street food place for the area of Ascoli. And they serve this, don't get jealous now. These are the so-called olive ascolane, which means it's pretty easy to understand. The city is named Ascoli, so these are the olives of Ascoli. That, of course, they don't grow like this, okay? These are olives that are filled with meat, with grounded meat, a mix usually of beef and pork, along with, for example, the meat has to be like beef, pork, there's some eggs, then you add some Parmesan and some spices, then it's grounded all together and you use it to fill the olives that are then breaded and fried. And there is a lady that works at this place that gave me a little demonstration. There's no audio. So you see she is taking the pit out of the, don't do this at home because you're gonna get hurt, trust me. But she took the pit out with that knife. Now she grabs some of the meat from there. She puts it in the olive. Okay, then she will pass the olive in the flour. There we go. And after the flour, it goes in the egg. That just, you know, raw egg to make it a little sticky. And then you see, she will throw the olive from the egg to the breading. So the olive is now breaded, but just to be sure, she will do it again. So one more time in the egg. There we go, with the breading, another time. Molto bene. And now the olive is ready to be fried and eaten like this one that I'm doing now. Okay, they're really good. I got more. This was my dinner tonight and I saved some of them to show you. And now we're moving to the next place, which is the beautiful Piazza del Popolo. Piazza del Popolo used to be the very central part of the ancient Roman city. I marked in red and yellow the two main Roman roads, the Cardus and Decumanus. So the red one is the Cardus from north to south. The yellow one, Decumanus, east to west, yes. So if you see in the lower part of the map, this is taken from Google Maps. So you also see there's a sushi place. There's actually two sushi places. It must be really popular in Ascoli. But we are going to see Piazza del Popolo. You can read the name there. On the left side, there is Caffè Meletti and Palazzo dei Capitani del Popolo, which are the most important buildings on this square. And then in the upper right quarter of the cross that I created with the two roads, you can distinguish there is a greenish dome that is a church. That's the church dedicated to St. Francis, although it's dedicated to him, but it's named after someone else. This is really interesting. So let's go. And this is what it looks like as soon as we step in the beautiful Piazza del Popolo in Ascoli Piceno. Just so you know, it is considered one of the most beautiful squares of Italy. And this is why. There you go. This is the feeling. Okay, it was empty and makes a little bit of a difference. But from here, you get to see all the important things that I'm going to talk about in a moment. So starting from the right, beside the gentleman, and I don't know if it's a man and a woman, I don't know. It's okay. Beside the person on the bike, we have the arches, okay, that they all look the same. And then we have the church in the distance, that is the Church of St. Francis, named after someone else, as I said. Then moving towards the left, we have the big palace with the big clock in the middle. That's Palazzo dei Capitani del Popolo, the palace of the captain of the people. And then we have a building that says Meletti. It's like a light pink or light peach color building. Okay, and that's the one we're going to start with because it is absolutely a little jewel on the square. Now, most of you are reading probably the main inscription that says Anisetta Meletti, but this is a cafe, as you can read on the balcony. So look at the upper part of the building, it says Caffè Meletti. Okay, Anisetta is the name of a very famous liquor they make in the Marche, which is made of anise, which is a typical herb that grows in the area, and Meletti is the name of the company. Now, this building used to be was built at the end of the 1800s to be the post office of the city of Ascoli. But right after the post office was moved somewhere else, so the the building was sold on a public bid, and Mr. Meletti bought it and turned it into a cafe, which is now considered one of the most important historical cafes of Italy. They are facing some financial problems due to the pandemic, so I hope you guys all come and buy coffee there so we help them. But this place is a real jewel on the square, also because look at what it looks like inside. It is Liberty style, so elegant, completely made of wood. And if you look at the picture to the right, there's a spiral staircase going up. Going back to this picture, that leads to the upper floor where you see the Caffè Meletti balcony, from where you can have, as you can understand, a wonderful view. But you can also sit outside by the umbrellas. It's still amazing. But just to give you an idea, so here it is, the Caffè Meletti, one of the most elegant cafes in Italy. And now we proceed to the center of the square, where we look at the building. That's probably the building that impresses us the most when we enter the Piazza del Popolo. And it is the so-called Palazzo dei Capitani del Popolo, the palace of the captains of the people. Allora, here they started building new buildings for the public meetings between the 13th and 14th century, when the city was growing and the buildings that were on Piazza dell'Arringo that we just saw were no longer enough. By the end of the 13th century, there was the captain of the people. They used to work in the building that was here that didn't look anything like the one we have now. So right after the captain, also the podestà started getting their work done in this area. What's the difference between the captain and the podestà? The captain was the chief of the local militia, and he also had legislative power. The podestà, instead, they had the judicial and executive power. So the power was divided between the two figures, the captain and the podestà. Now what happened? At the end of the 1400s, 1482, they understand that they need to use these two small buildings that were here to for the political activity of the city of Ascoli, because in Piazza dell'Arringo it was no longer enough. And as we know, the big building was only created in the 1600s. So we're talking about the 1400s, where there was only the two small buildings on the other square and two small buildings here. So they decided to turn this into the building it is more or less nowadays. So at the end of the 1400s, they decide to start building this palace with the same technique, I would say, that they used in the other square. So adding a wall around the pre-existing buildings. So there used to be two buildings plus the tower, three in total, that turned into one by adding the external walls. Now this was finished in between 1518 and 1520 by the same architect that did the church in the other square, Cola della Matrice. But now what happens? A few years before, the Pope was Julius II della Rovere, okay? The same one that worked on the Sistine Chapel, that made Michelangelo work on the Sistine Chapel, which is named after Sistus IV, but it's also Julius II that commissioned Michelangelo the Sistine Chapel. Now what happened? That Julius II was trying to improve the quality of life in Ascoli, and he's also the one that sponsored the square that we will see in a moment and understand why. But he did kicked out some families from the city of Ascoli because they were being just trouble, and he knew it was not a good idea to keep them there anymore. And this happened at the very beginning of the 1500s. So as I said, in 1520, this building was finished, but in 1535, a few members of one of the families that was kicked out of Ascoli, the Guiderocchi, decided to take control of this palace because they were complaining, as they wanted to be back to the city and participate in the political life again. Now it was 1535, but the main issue was that it was Christmas night. So the governor of Ascoli, that was sort of ambassador for the Pope, just to give you an idea, he decided that probably he wanted to spend Christmas with the family, didn't want to waste too much time with these people complaining and protesting. So the easiest way to get him out of the palace was setting the palace on fire, and he did so. So the whole palace was burned down in 1535 just to get rid of this family. And of course, they had to start reconstructing the palace that was then finished in between 1547 and 1549 by also adding this. This is the statue that, if I go back, you see it's right above the main door that was done during those years. This statue is Paul III. Why is there a statue of him there? Because in those years, Paul III died in 1549. So in those years, they were already celebrating the Pope with this statue because he was considered the one that brought most of the peaceful times to the city of Ascoli. First of all, because he gave political order to the city, but also because, when it comes to money, he gave 11 small towns that were in the surroundings of Ascoli to the administration of the city. So he made the power of Ascoli bigger in the area. And so they dedicated a statue to him on the main door. And there it is. Next, we turn around and we see the square. Now, this was done by will of, or financed by Julius II della Rovere, the Pope that, as I mentioned before, also established some rules in the city and kicked out some families. Now, there used to be, where you see the arches, all different type of smaller buildings, like smaller houses, shops, warehouses, and the square didn't look neat. And the Vatican, the church, wanted to give a better impression of such an important city like Ascoli. So they financed the whole operation, and they created this, this porch all around, made of arches, maximum one floor, with the upper floor with the windows all looking the same. The windows are surrounded by a marble frame, and then there are the merlons at the very top. What is interesting is that something that to you may look as an optical effect now, if you look at the very, very first arch on the right, you can see that it is much wider than some of the following arches. If you keep looking, the first one is much wider. This is not a problem of the camera lens or something. This is really so. So the arches are not all, they're all different. They're not all the same. So the reason is that the arches were built in front of the house or the shop that was there. So if my shop was wider than the house next to me, the arch in front of me would be wider because that was used to preserve my business or living space as it was behind. This was simply made to give like a neat look to the square. Okay, so now we're moving a little further towards the Church of St. Francis. There we go. Allora, let me tell you this. Now, this is another picture with the flags that it's, well, the celebration, the medieval celebration that they do in Ascoli. This is the side of the church. You can see there is the bell tower. You can see there is the dome. And what I'm going to zoom in is this door right here. This is the side door. You can probably notice there is a statue at the top. We're going to get a little closer. And here we are. We have the door. Then nowadays it's just the exit due to the COVID restrictions. On top of it, there's a statue of Julius II. And right next to the church, you see that there are some more arches, but they look a little different from the ones on the square. Also, because if you look at the picture on the left, you don't get to see these arches from the square. This is the so-called Loggia dei Mercanti, was the space that the merchants of wool realized for themselves during the restoration of the square. So during the same years, 1509, 1510, they sponsored the construction of this space so that they could sell their stuff, they could show their stuff. It was a sort of a showroom. But what is interesting is a little marble plate that it's right there. Okay, you probably don't know what it talks about. I don't want to sound weird, but it talks about size, and here it is. Allora, this is a marble plate that shows the size of the building materials that could be used for the city of Ascoli. So if you were going to build your house, this was placed here in the second half of the 1500s. And this was a way to make sure that all the buildings were following certain standards. And the inscription says that if you were not respecting that, you would get a fine. So when if you weren't sure about the materials you were using, you should have come here and measured them, and these were the type of materials allowed for the construction of new buildings. And now I went to the front. Now let me quickly go back to this because it's not easy to understand what happened. We're back to this. That you see the church in the upper right quarter of the cross that I made. Now the main entrance is on the upper part of the red line. And as you notice, that is a very narrow street, so it's really hard to take pictures. But I've done, as much as I could. But I just wanted to make you understand why the pictures are so weird. So from here we went, I walked along the church and went to the front. So imagine that here, imagine that we walk under the lodge of the merchants next to the building material sizer, and then we turn right and we find ourselves at the entrance of the church. And here we are. So this is the main door. You can see some of the details. Okay, and here we are. I wanted to show you this. Look, the picture to the right is the front entrance of the church. There is a painting just above the door that represents the Virgin Mary with baby Jesus in the middle, St. Francis on the right, and St. John the Baptist on the left. The church is named after John the Baptist, but everybody calls it the Church of Francis because it was wanted by the followers of Francis in 1258. He was already died. And the church took about 300 years to be finished. It was finished during the end of the 1500s, although it was already inaugurated and became operative in 1371, when the dome wasn't even finished. As you notice, it is very similar to the side entrance that we see there, typical Gothic style. Also, you can tell by the front entrance, there's one big window at the top that is used for the light to go through. And again, it's very similar to the side entrance, which is the one dedicated to Julius II. Now, I wanted to put a bunch of pictures here because we're going to the next place, which is going to be Acquaviva Picena, known for the fortress. I wanted to share a few pictures to show you what, some of the things that you may find in the Marche region. Starting with the pictures at the top, we have, for example, the beautiful sunrises, because facing east, we always see the sunrise on the water. And that is something that it's almost like a tradition here to do it. For example, on August 15th, people stay up all night on the beach, having very easy partying, beside the latest years, of course, for the problems that we all know, unfortunately. But this is like a tradition to see the sunrise on the water, on the Adriatic Sea in the Marche region. The second picture is just to show you what it looks like in the inland. You can get lost and find these beautiful rivers that are flowing through the grass by the medieval town. To the very right, there is a shoemaker. This is actually from the Silvano Lattanzi shop. It is probably the most expensive. They are probably the most expensive shoes on the market. This gentleman is a sort of legend in the shoes industry. The person that is making the shoes is now his son, because he still works, but he's got a few years on his shoulders, so he needs somebody to take over his business. Now he is the person that made shoes to a lot of US presidents or billionaires all around the world. There are people that fly on a private jet to get shoes done by Silvano Lattanzi. To give you an idea, the cheapest ones you find in his shop are like 3,000 euros a pair. Both men and women, it doesn't make any difference. The most expensive pair of shoes that he sold were sold for 52,000 euros. Okay, you can do the conversion to your local currency, but I wouldn't do it if I were you, because it's really a lot of money. So then on the lower part, there's something creepy. That's a mummy. It is actually very close to where I live. I live not far from Ascoli. I live in between Ascoli and the Adriatic Sea. This mummy is one of the bodies that they found behind a wall of a room that was used by a little church. It was like a private room they had used for little meetings or little kids parties. When they did the restoration at the end of the just before the year 2000, they took a wall down and they found a bunch of bodies buried there. And so they had, of course, archaeologists and all type of people coming over and studying. And now there's a museum showing you 4 mummies right there. They're very well preserved because behind this wall there was a microclimate that created automatically and preserved the bodies. I'm not going to show you any more details because it can be a little too much for some people. Then we have a little picture of San Benedetto del Tronto, which is one of the most important resort beach towns of the area. This is the old part of the fisherman village, so you can see the blue windows and blue door, and then the sunflowers, because Marche, we like also to call it the region of sunflowers. When you travel across the countryside in towards the end of July, you see sunflowers everywhere. It's like literally yellow. It's a yellow region, and it's really, really amazing. So I wanted to give you a little bit of a overview about the Marche, but again, there is much, much more than this. So our next stop is from Ascoli going towards the water, and we're going to see Acquaviva Picena, but I just wanted to stop for a second and show you a couple of pictures of this beautiful little village called Grottammare, which is the hometown of Sistus the V. Pope Sistus V was born in Grottammare, and this is what it looks like. That's the main square with a little restaurant and the beautiful view overlooking the Adriatic Sea. This was just a little extra for you. What happened? There we go. Okay. Acquaviva Picena. I named it the Unbreakable because of it's got one of my favorite buildings in the whole region, and that's the fortress that we see here, like, you know, one section of it, named the Unbreakable because despite the several attacks and everything else, it's still there, and they're still very proud of having their own town. So talking about the city, this is the square we enter from when we visited. The first evidence of the existence of the city dates back to the year 947. We find the name in some documents. Actually, the family that took control of this town also got the name of it. So the family controlling Acquaviva was named Acquaviva themselves. So this is the main square. Now, I would like you to look at the little arch that you see in the bottom left part of the picture, because that is the entrance. But as you can see, you don't see like an opening towards the outside because the entrance is just down there. So it's like a sort of niche, so that when you enter, you have to go like this towards the left. This was made to give better protection in case of attacks, because imagine that you're entering and you have the city in front of you. That is one thing. But if you enter and you have to turn left immediately, of course, it's harder for people attacking to face any resistance inside the city. Now, what happened? The city of Acquaviva, beside the different problems between the emperor and the pope, because they were more on the emperor's side, but they had to deal with someone trying to make the pope happy, and I will tell you about it later. At the end of the 1700s, the man with the stomachache, as I like to call him, Napoleon, because he's always represented with a hand on his stomach. Napoleon took control. The troops of Napoleon took control of the city of Acquaviva, and the bandits of the area were led by a man named Sciabolone. So Sciabolone wanted to liberate the city of Acquaviva from the French. And of course, he knew he wasn't able to enter from the main door because it would have been controlled and locked. So what he did was he had an affair with someone in town. This person let him in. So he entered from the house that was facing towards the outside. He entered and he opened the gate of the little arch that we see down there. Now, what happened? When he opened, his troops were ready to attack, of course, because they knew that he was going to open from the inside. As soon as he opened, they shot with a small cannon that they had, just to make things clear, like, we're not coming in peace, we want to fight, and we want to liberate the city of Acquaviva. Now, as he shot with the cannon, here, looking, okay, try to follow me because these pictures were not easy to take. Use as a reference the road sign, the white road sign with a red circle that you see there on the left side of the picture, And when we go to the next one, you see the road sign again, and you know that that's where the entrance to the city is, just below the road sign. So imagine that as soon as you open, they shut, and of course they hit the church that is right there. That's the church dedicated to St. Nicholas. And still nowadays, if we zoom in, we can see the hit mark left by the cannonball, and there's also a plate commemorating it. That's quite interesting because it's over 200 years ago, like 220 years ago, and it's still there. So from here, we just walk like a very few moments and we get to the beautiful fortress. This is what it appears like when you get there. You walk through this, little alley and you end up at the fortress of Acquaviva Picena. And this is the symbol of the city, also because it represents the fact that the city was always strong and independent. Okay, the fortress was first built in the 1300s. Okay, although the city was already fortified itself in the 1200s, we know that in the 1300s, that's when the fortress got the shape, but not the one we see nowadays. It used to be a little different. The next picture is from above, so it's a little easier for you to understand how beautiful this place is. Now, the fortress that was here in the 1300s used to have straight walls, not inclined, they were straight, and the main tower that you now see circular used to be octagonal. One second. So what happened is that in the 1200s, they, as you can see, there is like tables in the middle of the fortress. That's for the celebration that they do in August. That's when they celebrate a very important wedding that happened in 1232 between the daughter of the Acquaviva family and Rainaldo, who was the son of another important family that was very close to the emperor. So this was a move to give more power to the city of Acquaviva, gaining more favor from the emperor. So they celebrate this wedding because it really meant a lot for the city of Acquaviva, and they do the celebration the first weekend of August. Now, in the 1400s, though, Francesco Sforza, that was the Duke of Milan, was trying to help the Pope get back as many towns as possible in the area of the Picenum. Okay, and so he also wanted to take Acquaviva. So in the 1400s, he came here and partially destroyed, damaged the fortress that was rebuilt when finally the city was able to get its independence again at the end of the 1400s. And later on, it was modified to survive but the invention of gunpowder, because until the time there was no gunpowder. So after, they had to make the walls inclined and the main tower circular, because it was the only way for the building to resist to the attack with cannonballs and large bullets in general. Because if you have an inclined wall like this, a cannonball will most likely rebound but not crack through and break the wall. Because if the wall is straight, the cannonballs can break them easily. The same for the surface of the tower. An octagonal, it's got like corners that are easier to break. The circular one offers a smaller surface to the cannonballs, and this avoids the weapons to have a large impact on the fortress. And we have to say that they preserved it very well. These are a few pictures from the fortress. You can see from the inside, from the towers, it's got beautiful views all over. The Italian flag is standing on the main circular tower that you see over there. And we go on to Fermo and what I call Harry Potter's room, and you will understand why in a few moments. So Fermo, the name itself reminds of an English word. It could be firm, so something stable, something solid, something sure. It was a colony created by the Romans to keep an eye on the city of Ascoli, because the Romans, as I told you, they knew that Ascoli was a little difficult because they were not the easiest people to deal with. So they built the city. They created a colony of Firmum Picenum, okay, because it was still in the area of the Piceno. What we see nowadays is a beautiful city that started during the Renaissance, just like most of the places, thanks to the same person that destroyed the fortress, so Francesco Sforza. Okay, here we are. Allora, this is the famous Piazza del Popolo. That is where we enter from. The huge building in the back with all the coats of arms is the entrance to the square. Okay, when we enter the square, so from the other side, this is what it looks like. It's got like two side of columns on each on both sides, and those are from the 16th century. But the square itself was started in the 1400s when the wife of Francesco Sforza, Bianca Maria Visconti, visited Fermo, and this is also where she gave birth to her son that was the future Duke of Milan. We have two buildings at the end that were then connected by the passage that we will see in a moment. The yellowish, it's a sort of like mustard color, it's the public library, and to the right we have the Palazzo dei Priori, which is a similar thing to the Palace of the Captain. So it was like an administrative building for the city of Fermo. Now imagine that we walk along the arches on the right and we get to see the buildings, the Palazzo dei Priori and the public library a little close up. This is what it looks like. So the picture at the bottom is ourselves behind those columns. We have the public library in the mustard color, connected by that passage that is pointed by the red arrow. It's called passetto, which means little passage, and it's connecting it to the Palazzo dei Priori, which is a building from the 17th century that was created, putting together more buildings that were there, a private one and a church, the Church of St. Martin, which was also giving the name to the square. Before being Piazza del Popolo, it was named the square of St. Martin. Now, inside the public library and the Palazzo dei Priori, we have like one museum. It is one more thing. There's different rooms. One of the rooms, which is still decorated with beautiful paintings, is used by the mayor for public meetings. The other rooms are just little exhibits of traditional costumes, or there is a room with all the coat of arms of the cities that were under the control of the province of Fermo. But the most important one is what I call Harry Potter's room, and it's this one. No, this is, sorry, public library. Here we have the Palazzo dei Priori from the outside. Oh, by the way, the statue there, I will show you Harry Potter's room in a second. So the statue at the top is Sixtus V, the Pope that was born in Grottammare that I showed you earlier. There's a lot of references to this Pope in this region because, of course, he's the only one that was born in Le Marche, and he is celebrated quite a lot. So as we enter the Palazzo dei Priori on the upper floor, we get to see Harry Potter's room, which is one of the library's room. And there we go. It's the Globe room. It is just unbelievable. This is a room that dates back to the 16th and 17th century, the room itself. The Globe comes later. But this was a library that was created by a doctor, like a medic that was named Romolo Spezioli, and he was also the official doctor of Christine of Sweden, okay, the Queen Christine of Sweden. So he was a very important personality in the history of Fermo, and he wanted to create this library. Imagine that there are 16,000 volumes. And maybe you didn't notice, but if you look just look behind the chairs in the Globe for a moment. If you look at the lower part of the shelves, there are the bigger and heavier books, while the smaller and lighter ones are placed at the top. So there is just a practical reason behind that. The Globe was instead made in 1713 by a cartographer named Moroncelli, and okay. I was not allowed to touch, and I'm still not, nobody's allowed to touch the Globe for, of course, they want to prevent any possible damages. But trust me, if you look at the Globe, there is, so I couldn't move it to take a better picture. So we're looking at Africa now, but on this Globe, there is no Australia yet because it was not discovered yet. And so we look at the other side of the library. Here we have the painting, the portrait of Romolo Spezioli, the doctor that donated the books. You see that the books are placed in the same order, heavier ones at the bottom, smaller ones and lighter ones at the top. This is a picture from above that gives you the idea, and that's why we call it Harry Potter's room. Of course, you're not allowed to play Harry Potter if you ever visit it, but it's worth taking a look. And next we have the so-called Teatro dell'Aquila, the Theater of the Eagle. It is the first. It's the first theater built in Fermo, and it was built at the end of the 1700s. Consider that Marche is very well known for the theaters. They have a lot of theaters everywhere. This one is one of my favorites. Just to give you an idea, this is the main stage with this beautiful curtain. Both the curtain and the ceiling that we will see later were designed by the same architect whose name was Cocchetti. The total number of seats was about 1,000. They're divided on 5 levels that you will see better in the next picture. And there are 124 boxes for people to watch the shows in the theater. And also you see the ceiling was painted by the same artist, Cocchetti, and this is representing more mythology. So we have Jupiter, Juno, the 3 Graces, Apollo playing the lyre on the right. So it's all referred to the arts and, you know, in a classical way. And this is another place that is really worth visiting when looking at the city of Fermo. And last not least, Loreto and the sanctuary of the Holy House. And here we have to talk a little bit about the tradition. I like to refer to the tradition when we talk about Christianity, because there's always a mix of truth and fantasy. But in order to respect the religion itself, we use the word tradition to refer to the facts that are told about some places or some things. Now, the tradition says that at the end of the 1200s, the angels picked up the house of the Virgin Mary in Nazareth and flew the house to continental Europe. They first went to Croatia. If anyone knows Croatian, it's a language with no vowels. So the house was taken to a town named Trst, okay, T-R-S-T. If don't hurt yourself if you try to pronounce it. Despite my Croatian girlfriend, I'm still unable to speak Croatian properly because I don't know how to speak without vowels. So it was taken to Trst, okay, which is right there in that part of Croatia. Then the house was flown again after 3 years from, and now there you see Fiume, which is the modern town in the area, but they used to be Trst. It was taken to Ancona. Ancona is the main port of the region of Marche. Then from Ancona, it was taken to Porto Recanati, okay, because they wanted to protect the house of the Virgin Mary. And then from Porto Recanati, it was finally taken to Loreto. So first of all, Loreto is a town whose name comes from the laurel that was in there. There was a lot of laurel, so it was Lauretum, and it's named Loreto. Now, let's clarify about the fact that the house of the Virgin Mary was flown by the angels, because of course we know that houses don't fly, and it's not even easy to make a house fly, even if we have the techniques. The thing is that it was taken care of by a Greek family named Angelos. Okay, Angelos in Latin or Italian has the same concept the same meaning, which is angels. So that is why they said that the angels took the house and flew it to Croatia and then Loreto, because of the name angels. Of course, it was transported by most likely by water. We don't know. We have some documents, but it's not very clear. But what is interesting is that we know, because we know that the house is most likely the original one of Nazareth, which is where now we have the Basilica of the Annunciation in Nazareth. And the reason is because it's made of 3 walls, not 4, that match perfectly the hole in the wall that is left in Nazareth. Okay, also the materials, the constructing materials were the same, and the graffiti that were found on some of the bricks are the same from the area. So there's a lot of clues that make us believe that this was the real house of the Virgin Mary, where she received the annunciation of the Immaculate Conception. Now, since though the tradition says that the house was flown to Loreto, in 1920, Pope Benedict XV declared the Virgin Mary of the Madonna of Loreto the patroness saint of the Italian aviation. So all the Italian military pilots are devoted, if they want to the Virgin Mary of Loreto. And that is why in the next slide, you see we have an airplane. This is a short video that I put together from some footage that I had in Loreto. It lasts less than 2 minutes. I would recommend you to turn the volume up so that you can hear how quiet this is. Now, it was between the lockdowns. It was really not like full lockdown. We were allowed to go out, but still not much going on. But this is pretty much what it feels like. Turn the volume up. I'm going to turn my volume up too so that you can hear better and you can hear how quiet it is. And I will tell you what we're looking at as we move through the video. So we start with the military aircraft. It says Frecce Tricolori. It's the national core of the Italian aviation. It means like the tricolor arrows, because the aircrafts, you know, they're considered like an arrow. In Italian, it's a term used. Freccia is the word for something fast. Even a train is called freccia. The bullet trains are called like this. So the Frecce Tricolori, the tricolored Frecce, are the official Italian aviation, and this is how you are welcomed in the city of Loreto. Let's take a look and try to listen to the quietness. Enjoy the silence, to mention the Pesh mode. It's really, really low, so you probably cannot hear it. But now we see the fortified part of the city. Imagine that Loreto is a fortified city. It's like a whole fortress. We're going by the panoramic point. We have the Adriatic Sea. The mountain that you see is Mount Conero, one of the most important ones in Le Marche. And right by the Conero, we have a beautiful, beautiful water. And now this is what it looks like when you enter. So we are entering through one of the buildings around the main square, Piazza della Madonna. And when you enter, the visual impact on the Basilica of the Holy House is really, really impressive. I should have done the volume a little higher, but I didn't know it was going to be so low. But trust me, it is just as quiet as it sounds. We have the Palazzo Apostolico on the left and behind us, and the Church of the Basilica of the Holy House with the bell tower that, you know, they come from different timings. Now, getting a little closer, we look at the fountain that is in front of it. In the distance, in front of the church, you can see the statue of Sixtus V. So just a few details on the fountain and the bell tower. And then we get to see the facade. And here I zoomed because we will look at this later, but there are two clocks and they're a little weird because the one on the left only has 6 hours, while in a second we will see the one on the right. And one on the right has got 12 hours. See? So there must be a reason for that. And then we turn around and we have the whole Apostolic Palace with the 3 flags at the top. Then I'm gonna zoom in a second: the Italian, Vatican flag, and European Union. This building, the Apostolic Palace, was an Hôtel Dieu, so it was like a hotel of God. It was a sort of hospital. Let's move forward. It was a sort of hospital, and for centuries they used to produce medications there. There was like alchemists inside that were preparing medications that were then sold all around the area. So here we have the church that was started at the end of the 15th century to protect somehow the house of the Virgin Mary that was placed, in the area. As I said, the bell tower was added later in the 1700s, It was designed by a very famous architect named Van Vitelli. He was a Dutch architect. He is the same one that designed, for those of you that know it, the Royal Palace of Caserta. Okay, while the facade that we see nowadays was finished at the end of the 1500s. So it was started towards the end of the 14. It took almost a little over actually a century to finish it. The marble, this is not the Italian, the same travertine that we see in Ascoli. This is white stone from Istria, so from Croatia, and we see again the connection with Croatia for what concerns the sanctuary of the Virgin Mary. We get a little closer. As I promised, we were going to look at the two clocks, and we try to understand why one has the 12 traditional hours in it, the other one only has 6. So while I don't need to explain you the one on the right, which is the 12 classical hours, I need to explain you the one on the left. And that's because the first 5 hours are to give the time to the friars for the prayers. Okay, they're supposed to pray 5 times a day. The last one is when they go to bed. Okay, so that is why there is only 6 numbers and not 12 as on the other one. And this is what it looks like when we get inside. Okay, consider that they're not very happy for people taking pictures, so I stole some of them here and there, and I've done my best. But it's divided into three naves. This is the central one that leads to the Holy House. The Holy House, now that we get a little closer, of course, couldn't look like this, because we're talking about the Holy House of the Virgin Mary in the Holy Land. This is the protection that was made towards the end of the 1500s to protect the Holy House. Now, this is the exit. You can also read the sign Uscita. Imagine that when we enter, we see you can see the little altar to the right. Okay, that's where you come from when you enter. So you will have to go to the right side to get in, and then you get out where these people are. So the entrance and the exit are on the sides. And this was made, as I said, to protect the house that inside looks like this. So, of course, the altar with the icon of the Virgin Mary was placed there afterwards, but this is what the Holy House of Mary looks like. And again, we have strong evidence that this is the real one because of the construction materials, the type of graffitis that are found on the bricks, and also because of the size of the house that perfectly matches the opening left in the rocks in Nazareth. Now, the statue of the Virgin Mary that you see there above the altar, we're not allowed to take pictures at all inside the house, so this is all I could do without getting in trouble. But the statue that you see there is not the original one. The original one dated back from the 1400s. It was a black Madonna. It was a black statue of the Virgin Mary that it didn't have a very happy life because it was first stolen by the soldiers of Napoleon in 1797. And then in the same year, there was the Treaty of Tolentino. So it was an agreement to bring back to the Pope most of the treasures that the troops of Napoleon stole. And this statue of the Virgin Mary was brought to Rome in the year 1801. But unfortunately, in the 1920s, there was a fire. A fire started in the house of the Virgin Mary, and the statue that was made of wood burned. So the Pope ordered a new one right away that was made using the wood from a cedar tree, a Lebanese cedar tree that was kept in the Vatican gardens. So they carved a new statue, and it was sent after being crowned in the Basilica of St. Peter in Rome. It was sent in 1921 to Loreto as a replacement of the original one, of course. Then we take a brief look at the ceiling. Now, to give you a reference, this is right above the marble box that protects the house of the Virgin Mary. How do we recognize it? Let me go back for a second. Look at the upper part of the marble case. You see there's a sort of balcony there. Okay, keep that in mind and look at the little arch on the upper left part of the picture, okay? Because these are the two references that we will use. The picture that we're going back to now is looking at the marble case around the house from the front, so from the altar, which is on the right. Look at this. So if you look at the very low part, you can see the upper part of the marble balcony. And what we see at the very top of the picture is the sort of arch that we saw there. So we are right below the dome. The dome is typical Renaissance. It was made and inspired to the Brunelleschi Dome in Florence, probably the most famous one. And it's not as big, it was smaller than that. But when it was built, it was the fourth largest dome known at that time. The largest one was the Pantheon, then there was Saint Sophia, and then there was the Brunelleschi Dome in Florence, and this was the fourth one at that time. So consider it as a diameter of about 22 meters. The cupola the dome inside was painted by Cesare Maccari, that was a local painter, but this happened later on in the 1800s. Now, the restoration of the dome and part of the church in Loreto was done by this gentleman here. This is Giuseppe Sacconi, and I mentioned him in the first city in Ascoli when we looked at the Church of St. Emidius. I told you that the Ciborius, the little altar under the main dome, was made by this gentleman. You say, Matteo, you're mentioning him. It's the second time, but we probably don't remember. It's not a very famous name. It's not like talking about Bernini. This gentleman was from this region, from the region of Marche, and the building he is mostly known for is obviously not the Cathedral of St. Emidius. The Basilica of Loreto could be interesting, but the building is really famous for is in Rome, and it's this one, the Vittoriano, the building to the unification of Italy. That's why I told you to keep in mind the name of this gentleman for the end. So whenever you go back to Rome, you see this building, you will know that this gentleman also restored partially worked on the restoration of the Basilica of Loreto at the end of the 1800s, as well as the Cathedral of Ascoli Piceno in St. Emidius in Ascoli Piceno. This is the right side of the Basilica, and I took this picture to give you an idea of the fact that the church itself is already a fortified building. You see, there is a tower there. It's not typical for a church. So as we walk along, we would see something like this. So Loreto, the whole concept is defensive and never offensive. The whole concept is not to make war, of course, but just to protect themselves from possible invaders. And this is what it looks like from behind. So we're just outside of the old city walls, and we see the amazing dome of the Basilica of Loreto, which is, once again, as I said, it's considered a fortified city. And grazie for watching. This is it for now. We now have questions from you. Again, I tried to show you as much as possible of Le Marche, but there is much more that we can show you if you ever come visit.
Wow, that was awesome. Thank you, Matteo. I, as always, have to put this on my list because I mean, I've seen a little bit of this region, but certainly didn't know enough about it. So now I want to sort of depart. I know it's about a 4-hour journey from Rome, right? So it's a good way.
If you start with the south, it's like 2.5, 3 hours. It's a very nice drive, by the way.
Yeah, so it's a nice way to do like a stay ahead or stay behind to a trip that you already have planned, and get to see.
It's very relaxed. So
right.
And just careful with the food because people here keep feeding you wherever you go.
Be careful with the food. Well, you don't have to be careful with the food as long as you don't weigh yourself after a trip.
The problem is that I live here, Mara. When people ask me, "Oh, Matteo, what did you get from the Marche now that you live there?" It's like 10 pounds. That's what I got. That's the most I got. And then, yeah. But just one thing that we were talking about earlier, Mara, I want to share this with people because now the presentation was all about the monuments. But you know what is incredible here? That pretty much everywhere you go, the food is awesome because tourism is not very developed. Okay, so they don't have they're not used to work with a lot of tourists. And the tourists coming here are the locals, people from Rome, from Milan, so still Italians. And you don't want to give Italians bad food. So they know that they got to keep their standards very high. It's really hard to find a bad restaurant in the Marche. And that's why I gained 10 pounds.
That's awesome.
Again.
So are you saying that the restaurants service the Italians better than they service the visitors in general, right?
No,
the standards are much higher.
No, I think that when you go to Rome or more touristy cities, it's easier to find less quality because restaurants are used to people that are in a rush. They're not into food that much because they're maybe having a quick visit. Here, people come to eat because Italians come to the market because they know food is good. Besides the olives that I still have, there's a lot of food that is delicious. And so they know that if they don't do well on the food, they will lose a lot of business. Also because the locals will talk and say, "Oh, don't go there anymore. Everybody knows everyone here." So I got to be careful when I go outside and anything I say, because everybody, it's like a very small village. But it's the good thing of that you can count on the locals because they know what they're doing because they want to keep the standards high and the reputation.
Good. All right. Well, we have received a ton of questions, which is great. I'm going to let you look through them a little bit. For our audience, if anyone is interested, I put up a slide. I have a ton of real life tours that are starting to go off. And I can tell you that this year is a good year. This is our transition year back to physical travel. So if you're interested in joining me and my group for any of the upcoming tours, please do not hesitate to reach out. I do have additional tours that will be added to that list as well. So keep your eyes open and always visit my website, Girl Travel Tours, which can always update you about our virtual tours and our physical tours as well. Matteo, if you're ready, we'll go to the top of the list and we'll address some of these questions.
Yes, it is in the Marche region. So it is another medieval village, which is beautiful to look at. I don't have any pictures with me now, but for people that are interested, you can easily find them. But Castelfidardo, yes, is in the Marche region. Then I see the second, okay. And there we go with the competition with the neighbors. This is probably someone that has origins from the Abruzzo region. Now it says, non è vero che anche gli Abruzzi sono plurali. It means, Matteo, isn't it true that also Abruzzi is plural? Abruzzi is the region south of Marche, okay? It used to be named Abruzzi, but now it's more and more common to say just Abruzzo, so the singular. That's why we say that Marche is the only one that can remain plural. But yes, Abruzzi used to be named in the past using the plural, but it's now singular. Cathedral of St. Emidius, what is strung on the wires from the bell tower in the picture? Okay, that picture was taken during the festivities when they decorate all the square with these beautiful lights and decorations. So the wires were used to hold some decorations. St. Emidius, okay, yes, I didn't mention this because I don't want to scare you, but yes, there are earthquakes in the area. Not too many, but sometimes it happens, so yes. Explain more about the baptistry. Why did they need an entire separate building just for baptism? Marlene, the reason is that people who were not baptized were not allowed into church. So in order to be purified, you had to go to the baptistry first, just one time, and then you could enter church. So that's why it couldn't be. Now we do the baptism inside the church because they're not as strict as they used to be. But in the past, there was a reason why. Do they make vegetarian oliva ascolane? Not only they do the vegetarian one, they also do the fish oliva ascolane. But that's the traditional recipe, which is from the 1800s, is the one with the meat. And the reason is because they had too much meat. They didn't know what to do with that. And since the region is rich in olives, and they're very famous, these olives, because they're very soft, they thought to make fill the olives with meat and everybody happy. I missed what those yummy stuffed olives are called. Anyone know? Olive. Can we type it in the chat maybe? Olive, or I can type it. Sorry, I will. Oh, okay, I missed it. I'll type it in the chat. Olive Ascolane. Enjoy. Then the next question, I enjoy seeing all the square. Is there never any car traffic in this area? Where are the streets for cars? Okay, this is the good thing about the market, that they have a lot of pedestrian areas. So you walk pretty much everywhere, and that's a good, excuse to eat a little more sometimes. But the areas that we have seen are completely pedestrian, and you can only access them on foot or by bike. What is the source of the leather being used for the shoes? Mostly it's a veal or cow leather. Name of the shoemaker, please. Good for you. I'll type it in the chat. It's Silvano Lattanzi. He speaks perfect English. Okay, let me just close this. Then we have Fano is in the region. Yes, it is. Fano is in the northern part of the, yes, Acquaviva, which is, I understand the question from Deborah Diver. Yes, Fano is in the northern part of the region. Acquaviva to Fano, consider about a couple of hours driving north from Acquaviva, which is in the south, to the north. How many people live in the towns you showed us today? In Ascoli, we have about just a little less than 40,000. Acquaviva, less than 10,000 people. Fermo, I think, is around 30,000. And Loreto is, I don't remember Loreto, but it's really, really small population, because Loreto is mostly about the sanctuary. When Italy became a unified country in 1861, why wasn't San Marino included in the new country? Because they wanted to keep the independence, and they were not bothering anybody, so they stayed independent. But it's really worth visiting San Marino too. Stuffed olive, I see someone in the chat, is Oliva Ascolane. Yes, those are the stuffed olives, Oliva Ascolane. Oh, the name of the doctor and the library and the globe. Okay, so the name of the doctor is Rome, or was, because he passed away a while
Matteo,
ago.
when you type it in the chat, make sure you have everyone indicated so they can see it as well.
I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. Ramo Spezioli, you're right. Olive Ascolane, I missed it earlier. Okay, Romolo
I retyped the other ones.
Okay, thank you. So Romolo Spezioli is the name of the doctor who sponsored the library, which is named, the Globe Room is named after, the whole library is named after Romolo Spezioli. The Globe Room is just one section of it. Do you know the reason for two different clocks? I will repeat it. It's the one with the 6 hours. It's used for the prayer, because there's 5 prayers during the day plus bedtime for the friars. The other one is the standard one with the 12 hours. There is a Loreto Abbey girls' secondary school in Toronto, Canada. Oh, that's cool. See, there's a Loreto Abbey in Toronto, Canada, a Catholic school. Okay, well, I assume so. Have you seen the movie Under the Tuscan Sun? Yes. Don't ask me because I don't. I watched it, but I don't remember the movie. But I remember it was nice. She was restoring, and there were all these Italians flirting with this American lady, trying to live in Tuscany. I remember some of that. So much more to see. We have been to 13 regions of Italy. Marche is our favorite. Laid back, historic, and beautiful. Thank Frank Maio. Suzanne Caprio. How do I find out more about the food and wine of this region and the festivals in September and October? There is the official website of the region, visit marche.it, and that's the official website. A typical cuisine, it's mostly, you've got a large variety in the typical cuisine of Marche, because if you go by the coast, you've got excellent, and when I say excellent, I mean like unbelievable seafood. And when you go more in the inland, you've got more meat, for example, the olives or just the meat in general. But I'm so lucky because I live in between the sea and the mountains. So it just depends on how I wake up in the morning and I decide to go. The last artist that I talked about, hold on, give me, Mara, someone is asking information about your next Iceland trip. The last artist I named was Giuseppe Sacconi, the architect of the Okay. What is the typical? Okay, cuisine. We answered the typical cuisine. This was one. Thank you. What are those buildings used for these days? I think Marianne is referring to the Apostolic Palace that is around the square of the main square of Loreto. If that's what you mean, there used to be, as I said, a place, sort of hospital, but it's now it is a museum. So you only go there. You only go there as a museum, and it's €8 to get in. If you are older than 75, then you don't even pay. Then
Back to the questions, if you don't mind, Matteo.
What is the typical cuisine?
Yeah.
And as I was saying, you go from everything from the sea to the from the seafood that is more typical of the coastline to more meat and other stuff that is in the mountains. And that is also why they say it is Italy in one region, because you've got pretty much everything. There is one interesting thing, is that we have some fettuccini that are made in a town near Fermo, and it's the fettuccine of Campiglioni. What is interesting is that they received a special reward as IGP, which means geographical protected area. It means that that type of pasta can only be made in that town. They're very popular all over Italy, but when it comes to fettuccine, you can have them every day, pretty much everywhere. So it's not very common to think about the fettuccine di Campofilone very much, but the fettuccine, are something typical that is made of, that has a typical recognition in the Marche region. This was one of the buildings. Okay, we answered to Marianne about the buildings that are nowadays a museum, so you can see where they used to keep the sick people as a hospital, and where you and you can also see the place where the popes used to stay. The last pope to be there was John 23rd. Then it was turned into a museum in the second half of the 1900s. So no more popes slept in the Apostolic Palace in Loreto. What time of the year is best to visit, combining weather and festivals? Okay, and now this is a little tricky, because the best festivals are usually at the beginning of August, but that's the hottest time of the year to visit. So even if you go by the beach, it's still there. First of all, it's really it's more expensive because that's when all Italians go on vacation. Second, it's really hot. So in my opinion, if you don't mind sacrificing some of the festivals, the perfect time to visit is the first 2 weeks of September, or the whole month of September and October. Those are perfect. Is there a special day to celebrate the Virgin of Loreto? It's the 8th of December, because it's the Virgin Mary. What are your favorite parts of the Marche, other than what you have mentioned? Okay. There is also Urbino. It's beautiful, but that would have taken too long on this presentation. Urbino is a city in the very, very north. It is actually, I think it's the one in the picture you have there, Mara. Let me see. I don't see it. There's all the, no, it's not Urbino. That's Loreto. No, not even that. By the way, no, Urbino is beautiful. It's the city where Raffaello was born in. Then you have all the area of the Conero Mountain. It's the big mountain by the sea that we saw in the view from Loreto during the video. But the Marche, it's beautiful everywhere too, because every place is like a small jewel along this region, and you can literally go from the mountains to the water to the sea in one day. But yeah, I would say Urbino is another beautiful city. There is also Senigallia, which is a very, very beautiful city because it's got a lot of history, museums, and monuments in general. But at the same time, it is right by the water. How far is Marche area from Tuscany? Distance by car and time depends on where you want to go. Because from Tuscany, I would say that you have an average of between 2 and 3 hours driving, depending on where you. Let's say 3 hours to be on the safe side from Marche to from Tuscany to Marche. Please type name of the prince. Let me see, there is the other cities in Marche. I would type Urbino, Senigallia. Then we also have Conero Mountain and Conero Riviera. These are some of the cities that I've mentioned, but there's many, many more. You're welcome, Raven. Okay. But this during the tour, but is there a festival specific? No, not about Rossini, no. No, there's no festival. In the agricultural sector, what are the most important crops of the region? Wheat and the olives also are very important. And so wheat, olives, sunflowers, seeds that are used mostly for the oil. And that's pretty much it. And then they've got all sort of vegetables, but there's nothing like high level, although agriculture is really, really strong in the area, as well as the production of wine. The only problem is with the wines is that most of them don't have a DOC label. That's just, the quality is excellent in my opinion. They've got excellent wines, but the reason why there's no DOC seal on the wines is because they have it's been more of a political problem in between the cities saying our grapes are better than yours, so they couldn't find an agreement and they never find a way to have an official recognition of their wines. But let me tell you that that's another great product of the Marche. So no, Rossini, what place in Italy would be the first place to visit? Well, the first, if you've never been to Italy, Mara knows this better than me, but I would say Venice, Florence, and Rome is probably the best way to get an introduction to Italy if you've never been there. I've never seen a first-time visitor coming to Le Marche. It's a place for people that have already seen and enjoyed Italy and they want to see something different. It's not easy to move around as it probably is in other regions, but it's really, really worth it. Then we have a question from Maria Kliavkov. Is there a festival particular to the olives around harvest time? They have some little local festivals that are called Sagra. The harvest time is usually in is towards October, more or less. It depends on how much you want to wait for the olives. Sometimes they just pick up the olives when they're a little less ripe, but that's just a decision. It's around October. I've done it last year. It is really, really tough. It was a great experience because you spend a whole day in the olive groves. You're devastated at like 5 p.m. You want to go to bed, but it really regenerates you picking up the olives. It's a very great feeling of staying in touch with nature. Not just the cities, but the villages are wonderful. Is there a particular village you would recommend for a visit? Morag Wilson, let me type another village that is really interesting in the Piceno area, but it's this one. Or you have this one where maybe they say they have the narrowest alley in Italy. Then if you go to Abruzzo, they have one too. So they're still debating who's got the narrowest alley in the country. But for the, for the Marche people, it's Ripatranzone. Offida is also beautiful. It's still very close to Ascoli Piceno. So we answered more question. Are there winter sports in the region? Winter sports is mostly if you want to include hiking as a sport, like, and not a competitive sport, but they do hiking a lot on the mountains. And I'm not a big mountain person. I'm more of a sea person, but truly, they have beautiful hiking trails. Oh, my battery is dying. Beautiful hiking trails in the Marche, especially in the southern part of the Piceno area.
I'll leave you with the last question. I'm not sure if we have addressed it, but we'll address it one more time. Matteo and I were talking about this earlier before you all joined us, which is, how to experience the wonderful villages around these European countries, and especially Italy, right? And these regions outside of the most popular tourist areas are part of this journey where you can really get to see the more in-depth, smaller, more personal towns and villages that Italy has to offer, this region being one of them. So Matteo, I'll leave you this one question. If you had to point out one village or small getaway place that none of us know about, or maybe we just found out about today, what would it be? What would be top on your list for that?
Okay.
Not on
we're talking about Le Marche, I would go with Offida. Offida is really worth it too.
And that was just typed in the chat for anybody who's
in the chat. Yeah, it's in the chat. I typed Offida and Ripatranzone. Ripatranzone is another beautiful town in the Piceno area. And then the last one that I want to recommend is, I'm going to type it. This is really, 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 really beautiful. Torre di Palme. It is right next to Fermo. It's considered one of the most charming towns in the country. It's
awesome.
A small town.
Torre di Palme. I was just going to say, with that, Matteo, I want to thank you for bringing these places to us tonight, and to the audience who's still with us. Thank you very much for hanging around and doing all the Q&A with us. It's always a pleasure. As I said, we will be taking a little bit of a break for the next couple weeks. Use that time to go and check out the recordings. Follow us on my private group if you want to see my travels to Ecuador and the Galapagos. And Matteo, I hope to see you again soon with another region in Italy. It was so nice to see everybody. Take care and have a great day.